Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Phoenix Oracle podcast. I'm Sue. This is Jules, and we're sharing more content today about spirituality. And we were thinking about what we would be chatting about today, which we always find plenty to chat with you about. We actually struggle to narrow it down sometimes. It's very much in the realms of challenges around spirituality and in our everyday personal lives. So there's a lot in the culture of spirituality around vibration and being high vibe and stereotypes that go around about what it is to be spiritual and high vibe. Do you feel pressure to be high vibe in a spiritual world that you live in?
I wouldn't say pressured now, but I have been pressured, but not just in spirituality, in general life. My roots were in the hairdressing industry, and it was a case of opening the door and I'd walk and go, "Hi, darling," like literally one of those. And it was always about putting on that smile, that high vibe, and so sometimes it can almost become a bit performance, can't it? But I think as we evolve spiritually, it's about being authentic. It's about kind of like showing our weaker sides, our wounds, and I'm quite happy to share that these days. But I think when we first are beginning our journey, it's really hard, isn't it? Because it's about being vulnerable, isn't it? So I think, and I think it is quite out there, this like you say, this high vibe, spirituality. There are some spiritual bypassing, isn't there, out there, and and we are having our own lessons, even wherever we are in our awakening or spirituality, aren't we? So, but I think, to some degree, there is pressure of this high vibe energy. But when I talk high vibe energy now, I'm talking about high vibrational frequencies. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, again, it's like my theory now has changed. It's I'm talking about something completely different now, what I would call high vibe. But it's can be a struggle, can't it, keeping that high vibe going? But I think it's about being authentic at the end of the day. That's what I think. It's all about authenticity. But it's but we all do put on a I don't want to say an act, but we do allow people to see certain versions of ourselves. Some people aren't able to put on that high vibe, are they? It's I think it depends where we are on our life, on what our thought we're experiencing. But yeah, what do you feel about that?
Well, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? High vibe. I mean, really, what does it mean? It means different elements, doesn't it? Depending where you are in your journey. So initially, high vibe could be how you're presenting to the world, but to a degree that's coming from ego rather than soul.
Yeah.
And then when you get into the deep, dark healing aspect of what spirituality is, it becomes exactly that, a frequency, and you can't really hide your frequency. So I think, do I feel pressure to be high vibe? It's funny, I think I've gone through different stages of who I am and my growth. So the first half of my life, I was in complete denial to the outside world. I was so spiritual because that would have come with problems in my life. So was I being high vibe? It was probably very shut down. Have I gone through stages of believing that I have to appear high vibe to be what I believe myself to be? Probably as well. Do I feel pressure to be high vibe? No, but a little bit, yes. Yeah. So on that, what you were saying about spirituality being about authenticity, absolutely. Vibration doesn't lie.
No, it doesn't.
And through our growth, our vibration increases, which is what vibration is. Do I think I'm high vibe now? I would say yes, to the point if I sometimes don't drop my vibe, people don't understand what I'm talking about. There is that, but the high vibe is now what my soul frequency is, rather than I have to present a certain way.
Yeah.
The flip side of that, in my working capacity with a spiritual business and working with people at depth with a lot of trauma, a lot of releasing this life, past life, what have you, there can feel, and nobody is putting this on me, I put it on myself, a pressure to be vibrating as healthily and as high as I possibly can within my own healed self, so that I can feel I'm being authentic, ethical, moral, and that I'm in a good position to work with others. Do I take that too far? Sometimes we're checking in about, not literally with the words, am I vibing high enough, but am I in the right place right now? I probably am quite hard on myself for that.
Oh yeah. That's funny, isn't it? I think because, like, you know, the word high vibe, it's like, I think that I do carry a bit of a higher vibe in that way, because, you know, and you can recognize it when you're in people's company, like you say, because, you know, if you're around somebody that's got a high vibe, you feel lifted yourself, don't you? There's so many aspects to what high vibe actually means, isn't it? You know, and I do, you know, I've got that Leo energy, you know, I like to think that I, you know, literally I've got a, you know, I'm creative, you know, I like to make people feel good, you know, so it's like, you know, what would have been a high vibe perhaps 10-15 years ago would have been a fronted high vibe. Now I feel, like I say, it's an organic, natural high vibe. But then obviously I still have my you know, my days when I'm not so high vibe and I'm, you know, lethargic and I feel completely knackered. But, you know, it's still, high vibe means many different things, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think it's a true merit to how hard you've worked on yourself, as to the natural flow of high vibe without the masks that you're naturally at, and the fact that you're able to be quite okay, like today's not a good day, my vibe might be lower, and own it without, you know, some of the spiritual toxicity, which we will come on to in a moment, where we all have to be fluffy clouds, rainbows, and we have to be up here to be spiritual. No, we don't. Actually, true spirituality is going down there, then coming up to a higher level, then you go deeper, and then you come up to a higher level again. So it's riding the planes and the oscillations and vibration. If you're feeling ill, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling worried, anxious, vibration drops. But we can always work with our healing to bring it back up, because then you're your most authentic self. You let go of a lot of stuff that keeps your vibration low.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think then it goes back to, like you say, vibrational frequencies, doesn't it? Because you know, we've got the frequencies of love and happiness, joy, creativity. Then you've got the vibrations of anxiety, depression, you know, physical illnesses. So that's another kind of aspect to vibing, isn't it? I suppose, at the way, you know, everything has a vibrational frequency. Everything has. So as an energy healer yourself as well, Sue, you know, everything's energy, isn't it? Everything has an energy. Bit like when we're working with shamanic work, everything has a spirit. So you know, it's just bringing in that element, isn't it, of that, what we would class as a high vibe, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say parts of spirituality that people don't talk about? Because we're talking about high vibe. What's the other flip to that? Like what would you say, like, things that people don't talk about, like, spiritually, how they're feeling? You know, it's going to also have an impact on their vibration, isn't it? But, you know, what do you feel that people don't talk about spiritually?
I think the aspects that maybe don't always present outwardly or publicly, or, you know, on display with people, can be the shame-based aspects of spirituality. So spirituality is really about bringing ourselves back to who we really are. But when life happens, we go through our stuff, we get shame-based, we go into guilt, we go into regrets, we go into not feeling good enough. And these are the darker aspects, the shadow aspects, that are equally as important in spirituality, that people can either hide, so there's a level of human denial there and resistance, or they pretend isn't happening. And these are the parts that actually, if we don't work on those parts, our spirituality cannot flourish, because it's about actually accepting our story, accepting all the parts that we don't like about ourselves, working on all the parts that keep us in shame and guilt and regret, that keeps our vibration Our high vibe lower because we're at a lower vibe, we're in a lower energy, we're in a denser energy. These are the parts that sometimes, I think you've probably heard it as well, people were only showing the wonderful sides of spirituality, almost scared of judgment, what people think, to show, well, actually I've done this and I regret that and I've been there and I've been through this. But these parts are fundamental to the core of who we are. Compassion.
They are our makeup at the end of the day, aren't they?
They are our journey.
They are the journey. Absolutely, they are. And it's another thing is the fear of being judged as well, isn't it? Like, but that is what spiritual bypassing is, isn't it? Really, to a degree, where we're kind of like bypassing certain aspects of what we're experiencing, because like you say, it's not all love and light and rainbows and and all that, is it? It's because life is like that.
There, it's just
absolutely. Yeah. That's a sign, isn't it? Like, so it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And actually, I think the more people that can speak about these aspects of their spiritual path and actually share them with vulnerability, truth, in aid of teaching others that it's okay to be open and honest. We don't have to present in a certain way to be spiritual, because there's so many ethoses and weirdness around what it is to be spiritual. But you don't have to be wearing multicolored clothes or at a festival or smoking a reefer to be a hippie. All these stereotypes. You are just you, and everybody is spiritual in their own way. It's about working their story, coming back closer to their soul alignment to fulfill their best life. And it's all this gunk that we sometimes try to avoid that stops us healing in order to fulfill our life. But I think the biggest issue I see with people is their fear of what others think about them. It's so trapping. It's just a mindset that is such a huge trap and holds people back on their path.
It does indeed. And I think when we work through judgment and because like I know I've got to a place now, I'd say I don't care what people think about me. Obviously I do, but I'm quite open to say I'm having a human experience, and we are human, we're going to get things wrong. I have struggled in the past to be open, I think, for fear of perhaps being judged or whatever. But I think as I'm kind of growing in my awakening, I'm quite happy to share or warts and all, should we put it like that, if it's going to help somebody else
exactly that
heal themselves, then I'm more than happy to be open and to share about it,
because that honesty and that individuality helps other people break down their barriers, and it almost gives other people permission to share, permission to go, oh, maybe I'm not that bad because something happened. I used to get trapped in guilt and shame terribly, and half the time I didn't even realise it. And how much that drops our vibe. Our high vibe comes down. You want to be your high vibe. You take ownership in yourself. It's not even necessarily about telling the world, but ownership. Okay, I have felt this way. I have been through this. I have been trapped in this. Then you work through that. You come up to your individuality, in your true spirituality, which means you will shine in a way that nobody else does, because it's your true self that is not identical to anyone.
But sometimes that can cause conflict, can't it? Because because when we have higher vibrational frequency, sometimes we can trigger people, because
the hell out
of people, because they can't see that certain aspect in themselves, perhaps, or it's kind of like being the wounded soldier, isn't it, type of thing. But so that's another pattern, isn't it? But but you mentioned guilt. Oh my God, like I think everybody has an experience of like having to work through some kind of guilt. I used to carry guilt, and I don't even know why, because I've been quite a very loyal person, like through my relationships, whether it's friendships, personal relationship, whatever. But I think, that's something that I think everybody has to experience that, I think, because, when we're going through our teachings, it is working through each emotion, isn't it? Which we all have to experience. I think that is a part of our evolution, is to, we've all been born on this earth, came with free will, and I think that's basically what helps us to evolve through our going on one now, but you know what I mean, like, I don't want to go off subject, but
well, I think it is on topic, because if you think about it, sometimes we're carrying very deep emotions that aren't even ours. They've been passed down our spiritual inheritances, our lineage, our karmic transfer, ancestral. But there is a science behind the vibration of emotions, and guilt and shame is one of the lowest frequency of emotion to be measured. And of course, we get to experience all of them to come up to the highest level, which is enlightenment. So we have to come up, but what happens in our humanness is we keep going back down, up and then back down. So it's getting off the treadmill.
I call it the spiral. It's a spiral, isn't it?
Terrible spiral.
Yeah, a spiral. It is. Yeah.
How do you fish yourself out of the spiral? But that's where spirituality can really help anchor you, give you a different aspect on a certain angle of something to help you not get frozen and stuck in those lower densities.
Yeah, loop. I call it the loop, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Loop of the human experience.
Right, that's our pause. I think we did that quite well. Feeling exhausted while still growing spiritually. Right, am I asking that question, or if you like, So when we're in that loop, sometimes we can be left feeling very exhausted, can't we, Sue? So it's like, how do you work with that, like, while you're still growing spiritually?
Admittedly, I haven't always worked with that well. I'm somebody who just goes, and need a 9-day week, and I'm like a repetitive robot. I've been hearing myself saying this. Those of you that know me will hear, I'm too busy, I'm blah, 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 blah. But I'm repeating and haven't fully managed to break a cycle for lots of reasons, and I could find millions of justifications as to why I haven't. But how do you keep going when you're exhausted? So the funny thing is, like I've said before in podcasts, I will get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I will do my yoga and my mindfulness. But actually, by carving out that time when there isn't time, or when I am exhausted, I'm also helping to reboot my system, my nervous system.
It's really hard to do that. Not every, that's a gift to be able to do that.
Virgo discipline. And there is. Through the exhaustion as well, there is a need to still keep going on some level, and I think that determination and that love of supporting people, helping people, working my part, helps me to push through with exhaustion. But there are things that obviously I do with it. I don't just keep soldiering on. I'm no martyr. My love of nature, my love of being around trees, woods, being with the elements, with the wind on my skin, the sun on my skin, hearing the birds, doing different modalities of healing, particularly in nature, being totally on my own, alone in the middle of a forest, in the middle of nowhere, where there's no internet connection, that just really feeds my soul. And living in Cornwall, I'm very lucky.
Paths before, literally on a woodland path.
We had there was deep in the woods that time, looking for a missing dog. But hey, we still did. But so that's how I kind of. I don't want to encourage by saying push through exhaustion, but manage exhaustion in busy lives where we have to keep honouring what we're here to be doing, but at the same time notice and nurture self.
Absolutely. I think it is about, again, the word balance, isn't it? Because if we're exhausted, we also have to listen to our body, don't we? But it is about pushing through, because on the flip of that, like for me personally, I'm often exhausted because I'm like constantly burning the candle at both ends. That's something I'm quite happy to share, and obviously suffering with severe insomnia, which is definitely not as bad as it was, but I had severe insomnia for like 10 years, and that was literally like a hellhole. However, it's but I still pushed through, not just spiritually, but physically. I had a business to run, I had to show up. I've been known to I think one time, I think I had 6 weeks where like I literally practically had no sleep, like an hour's sleep, for, like 6 weeks, like in each, I was up
Hardcore.
yeah, literally hardcore, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, you see, my body, even though sometimes it's breaking, I still push through. I link with my warrior energy, like, and on the flip side of that, it's not obviously healthy for me, but I'm sure as hell got lots done. I've created a business. I've yeah, it's been full on. But the word for me is I kept showing up. So even when like I literally felt so exhausted, I've been known to, well, not known, but I've been driving home and I've been so exhausted. I'm like, like literally crying because I'm so exhausted. Like, I'm talking, a good kind of 10 years ago, but like literally, like I just kept going, kept going. But then it's linking with that burnout, isn't it? So, but even now, I still, I put so much into each day. But it's a big lesson that I'm learning still now in this moment, working in alignment, not burnout. Even to the point where I had to, a few weeks ago, as I was teaching, the spring equinox, and it was about kind of like, planting the seeds, not just physically but intentionally. What we want to nurture, and what we've kind of left behind in that kind of like winter stage as we moved into spring. And I always thought, I have to practice what I preach. I can't be kind of preaching one thing to others and then I'm not kind of like, doing it myself. So I had a bit of an epiphany myself about 6 weeks ago, and for me to like drop a class was huge. But sometimes I do like 15-hour days, and it's like, and just by dropping a meditation class and taking something fortnightly, I think I've freed up like about 15 hours a week.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like learning to value yourself.
Yeah,
Within,
absolutely.
And getting that balance in there. If you've got any tips for us on how to balance our spiritual lives and our spiritual businesses, we need that. But did you get any spiritual guidance from the realms of how to manage to honor your spirituality that you're teaching to others at the same time as honoring yourself? Because that can be the tipping point for humans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I've always got spirit like yapping in my ear out, and I'm not always listening, but then that's when they'll put me on my ass if I'm not listening. And it was coming to that point. So I just kind of had to go with that, to be authentic, to be, teaching something. And, it was something that was calling me to kind of like be authentic with that. So, and what that's done is it's freed up more time for me to bring back my one-to-ones, which, I'm not trying to create space to fill it, but it's like, it's just bringing in a different energy, different alignment, because I got to a point where I was doing a lot of creating, but for me personally, my journey is about teaching others to heal themselves. So, if I'm constantly creating, I need to kind of be there as well in a different way. But yes,
this is elements and angles on how to balance your spiritual life versus your own personal spirituality in the modern day living that we have now. And I find that my guides will come through if I actually slow down enough a moment to listen, because like yourself, I will get a bit of a spiritual slap and some firm words in the most loving way from them if I'm not listening. Like, whoa, you're coming out of alignment, you're not listening. I didn't even notice I was out of alignment because I'm so down on the earth plane, I'm not balancing up there. And I will often get messages, take it one day at a time, slow down, you're going through something, and I have to listen and surrender 100% to not knowing what's coming, but being told something's on its way, you're going to need to navigate, you need to this, trust, slow down, you need to come back to your body, you need to look at your nutrition, blah, blah, blah. Without it going down the rabbit hole of I feel selfish, I've got all these other things to do, or self-neglect.
Yeah, that's very true. But I usually find that because I pull a lot of cards daily, or I see a lot of synchronicities, and it's like I kept getting one card, like, which I'm still kind of getting it quite often, about bringing in a bit of yoga, doing a bit of yoga for myself, or and think, yeah, this is it. Like,
use me.
Exactly. And it's like, so they will repeat the lesson, what they want you to do, or however you word it.
And there is something about heeding the message coming in rather than ignoring a message so much that they let you go down on your ass.
Yeah, that's
and then you're out of action. Burnout, spiritual burnout, spiritual fatigue, spiritual overload, spiritual too much incoming, which comes down to boundaries. So talking of
boundaries, yeah.
What are your spiritual boundaries like?
Spiritual boundaries, I think. So if I talk boundaries, I think from a human aspect, I think we have to set healthy boundaries in order to be able to set spiritual boundaries, because for me, time's always an issue. But my spiritual boundaries is connecting in on a regular basis. And I've kind of got to a point now where I do trust my spirit guides, even if I don't understand what's coming in. So the boundaries aspect is kind of like showing up to spirit, just as much as I show up to the physical world, if that makes sense. Showing up for myself as well. But boundaries is a big one, isn't it? And it's like I say, it's not just spiritual boundaries, it's boundaries that we set in place in our human life, isn't it? Because that's something that I've had to work with, because I'm a people pleaser, I'm an empathist, I've got all the things against me to stop me from saying, like, I can't do this, or no, or they say, the word no is a complete sentence, isn't it? You don't have to justify yourself, and it's, I find myself kind of having a good chat with spirit more comfortably sometimes than I do kind of like not want to feel like you're going to want to upset anybody or things like that, isn't it? So, but I call them healthy boundaries, and I think when we, as we develop spiritually, we also have to bring those boundaries in on a human level as well, don't we? Because one of my biggest lessons that I've learned is the people that usually get upset are the people that are overstepping your boundaries in the first place, aren't they? So, boundaries is a big one.
Well, I think the boundaries and the spiritual boundaries merge and are singular as well. Boundaries, essentially, boundaries are teaching people how to treat you, but boundaries are basically self-protection. And I think in the realm of spiritual boundaries, we all need them, because spiritual boundaries brings it back to you. It puts the light back on you, on what's okay for me, what isn't okay for me, and how do I protect myself? Is that situation going to harm me in any way? So with spiritual boundaries, how do I protect my energy, my emotional well-being, my physical self, my time, my value? But our boundaries, our spiritual boundaries, are very dependent on our self-worth. So if we're people pleasing, and I've been a lifelong people pleaser, I'd like to think not so much anymore, but it brought me into a life of self-sacrifice and then resentment, because I had no boundaries to protect me. I didn't know what they were. So when we work our spiritual truths, we go into so much more self-reflection. We start to understand what our needs are at the root of it, and we become so protective of ourselves without a defensiveness. There's a healthy line there. A spiritual boundary can be very, very gentle, but it's like, no, I'm not going to do that with no justification.
So we do have to have those boundaries with spirit, especially I think with like mediumship and things like that. I got taught once that we even have to like have those boundaries with spirit, because at the end of the day, spirit will want to come through to you, and literally I got taught once that you have to have your opening hours, like even to spirit, because you have to have those certain boundaries there. But I also feel that, like, if we're linking with our higher selves in that aspect, like, our higher selves or our souls won't give us, they won't give us anything that our soul can't handle. Does that make sense? So, but yeah, we still have to have healthy boundaries with spirit as well.
Absolutely, so that we're not working in service 24 hours a day. And that took me a while, that one, because
me too.
I used to find if I didn't listen to messages that were given to me, I would be woken up in the night by spirit, or my blankets would be pulled back. But what I realized was it was because I wasn't listening, so they'd get my attention that way. And I've learned that I will listen to certain guides whenever they need to, because it's for my highest good, and they're not intrusive. Where I've learned the hard way of have to shut it down sometimes is more on the mediumistic side, where you've got passed over people wanting to give other people messages. That can wait. That's on my time when I choose. But when it's a divine from higher realms, where they're trying to get through to me for my personal own highest good, a truth, maybe I'm resisting or something, I will listen, but they're not intrusive. There's different levels of spirit that come through as well. So you can still say no, and you can help your spirituality whenever you can,
and absolutely, or shelve it, or just come back to it, or 100%. You have to be in the right mindset as well, don't you? It's about absolutely, mentally, physically, and spiritually, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's just about being grounded, isn't it? I like over time, isn't it?
Yes, groundedness.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That you give yourself.
Yes, it is indeed. So I think for today, that we can sign off this podcast.
I think so. It feels like it's just landed.
It feels like it's landed, absolutely. So we hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. We will be back soon with another one. So don't forget, guys, to subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying this content. And we will see you again soon.
Thank you for joining us.
Love and bye.